Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're unpacking a truly remarkable date, June 15th, 2026. In this explainer, we're looking at a day that didn't just, nudge history forward. It completely rewrote the map. Seriously, this single 24-hour period gave us this fascinating mix of diplomatic earthquakes, massive policy shifts, military developments, and some deeply moving human interest stories. We're going to dive right into the data and the reports to understand exactly how the world changed in just one day.
Okay, let's dive into this. On today's agenda, we've got first, war, peace, and energy. Second, European governance and law. Third, elections, sanctions, and trade. And finally, we'll wrap up with tragedies, protests, and sports. Let's get to it.
Section 1, War, Peace, and Energy. Tectonic shifts in global conflicts.
We have to begin with what is just a monumental diplomatic breakthrough. After some really intensive back-channel mediation by Pakistan and Qatar, a historic U.S.-Iran Geneva Peace Pact was actually formalized. U.S. President Donald Trump and Iranian Deputy Foreign Minister Kazem Garibati confirmed this comprehensive deal, and the goal? An immediate and permanent end to military operations on all fronts. I mean, this was literally the headline that stopped the world in its tracks, with the official signing ceremony set for Geneva just days later.
And this brilliantly illustrates the immediate, on-the-ground complexities of a peace pact like that. On the left side, you can see the direct results of the agreement. President Trump authorized the immediate removal of the U.S. naval blockade. That allowed the highly strategic Strait of Hormuz to reopen toll-free, and within hours, an Indian liquefied natural gas tanker, the Disha, successfully crossed right through. But contrast that with the right side of the screen. Striking a very different tone, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz issued a joint statement. They defiantly declared that Israel is going to maintain its active deployments. They're refusing to withdraw troops from the Gaza Strip, southern Lebanon, or Syria, despite this newly declared regional ceasefire. It's a really stark visual of how differently nations are navigating this incredibly volatile moment.
Now, if you're wondering why peace suddenly became such an urgent economic necessity, well, just look at this number. 43 years. The multi-month conflict took an absolutely massive toll on the U.S. economy, especially when it comes to energy. The Department of Energy reported that the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve plummeted by 9 million barrels in just a single week. Think about that for a second. That massive drop brought the reserve to its lowest capacity level in 43 years. We're talking all the way back to 1983. This wartime energy crunch is a pretty harsh reminder that international conflicts eventually hit everyone's wallet at the gas pump.
Shifting gears to something really heartbreaking, the tragic realities of the Russo-Ukrainian War unfortunately continued. Recent Russian air assaults set ablaze the historic Dormition Cathedral in the Kyiv-Petersk Lavra, which is just a massive, devastating blow to Ukraine's cultural heritage. The legendary Dovzhenko film studios were targeted too. But, beyond the cultural loss, the human toll is what really hits hard. 9 people were killed, and tragically, that number includes 5 emergency rescue workers who lost their lives while responding to separate fires in neighboring Kharkiv. Just incredibly tough news.
Section 2, European governance and law. Let's look at the sweeping domestic shifts across the continent.
Okay, picture this, striking contrast in global governance. On one side, the 52nd G7 summit is officially kicking off in Avion-les-Bains, France. You've got the leaders of the world's most advanced economies gathering for these high-stakes talks, discussing global frameworks, welcoming the U.S.-Iran peace deal. But literally just across the Swiss border in Geneva, an entirely different scene is unfolding. Over 50,000 anti-G7 demonstrators staged some incredibly intense protests. It is the perfect encapsulation of top-down global governance, meeting massive, grassroots civic resistance head-on. So the crucial point here is that while those big international summits capture the headlines, the domestic landscapes are shifting just as dramatically right beneath the surface. For instance, in the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced a sweeping, totally unprecedented ban on social media use for anyone under 16, citing some very urgent mental health concerns. Over in Hungary, a massive legislative shakeup amended their constitution to cap prime ministers at an 8-year term limit, while also dissolving the controversial Sovereignty Protection Office. And then, in a major scandal rocking Scandinavia, Marius Borg Høiby, the son of Norway's crown princess, was sentenced to 4 years in prison for rape. These are wildly disparate events, right? But together they paint this vivid picture of a continent going through a massive institutional and social reckoning.
Moving on to Section 3, Elections, Sanctions, and Trade, Redrawing Institutional and Commercial Borders.
This timeline right here lays out a truly historic democratic decree. For the first time in over 2 decades, the Palestinian territories are scheduled to hold national elections. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas officially issued the decree in June 2026, mapping out legislative elections for November of 2026, which, by the way, are the first since 2006, and that paves the way for presidential elections in early 2027. It's a major pivotal shift aimed at completely redrawing the lines of institutional governance in the region.
Meanwhile, back in the United States, defensive and foreign policies were creating these massive ripple effects in the commercial sector. The U.S. Department of Defense officially blacklisted Minnesota-based Cirrus Aircraft, a pretty prominent general aviation manufacturer. This was actually due to its ownership by a Chinese state-owned aerospace conglomerate which linked it to the People's Liberation Army and completely cut the company off from Pentagon contracts. On top of that, aggressive new Trump administration sanctions targeting Cuba's state-run entities forced the total shutdown of enviascuba.com. Now, this portal was a primary digital lifeline for Cuban Americans trying to send food, funds, and clothing back to their families on the island. Both of these actions really go to show how global security policies can just completely disrupt international trade.
And finally, Section 4, Tragedies, Protests, and Sports, where human elements intersect with global events. Unfortunately, we have to start this last segment with some very somber news. In Kern County, California, emergency teams responded to a catastrophic incident at Edwards Air Force Base. A U.S. Air Force B-52 Stratofortress bomber suffered a fatal malfunction shortly after takeoff during what was supposed to be a routine training mission. Tragically, the crash claimed the lives of all 8 service personnel on board. It's a heartbreaking reminder of the ultimate sacrifices made by military personnel even when they're far outside active combat zones.
From that tragic loss of life, we have to pivot to a very different kind of intensity. We often like to think of sports as this pure escape from global politics, but on this day, they literally collided head-on. So how exactly did global tension spill onto the soccer pitch? Let's take a look.
So the 2026 FIFA World Cup was happening right in Inglewood, California, and the geopolitical climate showed up right at the stadium gates. Just before Iran's match against New Zealand, massive crowds of Iranian Americans gathered outside SoFi Stadium. They were defiantly waving the banned, historical lion and sun flag to protest the Tehran regime. It was just this incredible moment where the intense passions of Middle Eastern politics transformed a sporting event into a massive platform for international civic resistance. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer underdog energy here. Tournament debutants Cape Verde stepped onto the world stage against an absolute international heavyweight, Spain. Defying literally every single oddsmaker on the planet, Cape Verde played Spain to a historic 0-0 draw. That incredibly hard-fought match earned them their first ever tournament point in group stage play. It's a phenomenal reminder of exactly why we watch sports, right? Because on any given day, the impossible can happen, and a nation of 500,000 people can hold off a global giant.
And that pretty much wraps up our explainer for today. June 15th, 2026 was a day of just profound contrasts. We saw historic peace pacts right alongside entrenched military deployments, high-level summits completely shadowed by massive grassroots protests, and heartbreaking tragedies contrasting with these unbelievable, historic triumphs on the pitch. So I want to leave you with this question. With borders being redrawn, historic pacts signed, and global protests raging, how will today's sweeping shifts reshape tomorrow's world order? Think about it. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this incredible day. Stay curious, keep learning, and I'll see you in our next explainer.